Stephen, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Yeah, so I'm an accountant. I run an accounting business. We're formerly known as Cheltenham Tax Accountants, but we've rebranded CTA just because it's less of a mouthful. It's a bit easier when we're picking up the phone. And also, we've kind of moved on that a lot of our clients used to be local in the Cheltenham area, but we've kind of expanded in terms of our reach, I'd say, in the last few years. I started the business about 9 years ago, literally on a laptop on the sofa in my house. I left the day job, had a small client base. And at the beginning, the vision and the mission at the beginning was just to be a bit fresher and more modern than the kind of typical accountant you find out
Uh-huh.
there. I mean, nowadays it seems that everybody's kind of jumping on that bandwagon and they're kind of, look at us, we're called accountants and everything. But at the time, 9 years ago, if you had any other color on your website other than blue, you were a bit probably crazy, and out there. But if you've got pink on your website, or you've got a real person and not a picture of a building and a calculator, you kind of stood out. So at the time, our branding sort of allowed us to stand out compared to a typical accountant. And we've kind of evolved since then, but that's how we sort of started.
How many people have you got involved in the business at the moment?
Altogether, there's around 13 people in the business. We've got an offshore team, so we've got a handful of team members in the Philippines, which has been something we've done in the last few years. And that's kind of helped. It's been a bit of a win-win situation, leveraging the Philippines team because they're highly skilled, highly qualified. A lot of them have come from big four accounting firms in the Philippines, from PwCs and the likes of those sort of companies. Our kind of model is we've got a UK team that are the client managers, so they're client focused. They build the relationships and build the trust and sort of give that advice to our clients. But then we have, as I said, we've got Philippines team members as well. So it's kind of like a machine where everybody got their own role to play and it all sort of comes together really from the client's perspective.
Yeah, is that Frontline you use in the Philippines?
So we actually go direct. So we don't use
Okay,
a middle company. I've actually done talks in different accounting groups on hiring direct from the Philippines. So they
interesting.
work for us directly. So we kind of, there's lots of benefits too, that without going into too much detail, but there's not this middleman taking this huge cut, which not only is more expensive for the business like ours, but the actual person you're paying is getting less money in their pocket.
Yeah.
And they feel more part of the team. So, they have appraisals, they show up for daily huddles with us. They've got, access to every system. So they're really no different than a team member that's based in Gloucester in the next town, instead of Cheltenham. So they're really part and parcel of the team and they speak amazing English. And just a normal team member, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a number of different outsourced Filipinos on that direct employment basis. You can get some great people, really good people. When you started on your sofa and you left the day job, was that an accounting job that you were leaving?
Yeah, so I think I was around 29 at the time. I'm about to turn 40. I might look a little bit older. And I had this thing in my head that I needed to take the leap before I was 30. So I had this kind of thing that it's kind of now or never in some ways. And I'm writing a book about this topic, actually, without going into too much detail. That's called The Accidental Entrepreneur. It's how a lot of people don't plan necessarily becoming a business owner, but opportunities present themselves and they go on this journey. And that was the case for me. I got qualified as an accountant. So I'm an ACCA accountant. And I loved learning. I've been learning for probably the best part of 10 years up to that point. And it was kind of what's next, what's the next thing to learn. And I just started looking at what other people are doing in terms of running accounting businesses. And it was born from frustration with my current employer, if I'm honest. I was just kind of tired of the way they were doing things. And I just felt like there was no innovation. I know it sounds a bit cliche, but I thought I can give it a better go or have a fresh approach to what they were doing.
Yeah. Your first clients, they were Cheltenham-based clients, were they? And then you've expanded from there.
Yeah, so it pretty much started like a trade, really. It's similar to having a plumber or having a carpenter. So you know somebody and they know you're an accountant, so they know you've got that skill. And it literally started, I think it was my PT at the gym. So I built a relationship with a PT and he just said, oh, can you do my tax return? I was still part qualified at that point. I was capable of doing what he wanted, but there was kind of this resistance from a lot of professionals where you feel you need to know everything before you can do something on your own.
Uh-huh.
Fortunately, I was very capable of doing his tax return was something I do sort of day in, day out with the day job. And I kind of said, yeah, I can do that. So he became my first client doing his tax return. He's still a client of ours now. So actually, he's been with me personally about 13 or 14 years, I'd say.
Yeah. And you didn't think, okay, well, let's do a niche for PTs or gym owners and go down that route?
At that point, the whole concept of niching probably wasn't something I was thinking about. I think that was later on after building a practice. That was a very relevant topic that everybody talked about, finding your niche. But at that point, I don't think it really crossed my mind. It was really, I just had a skill and I can build up a bit of side income, I think, at that point. That side income just carried on building, and it got to the point where it was about 40% of my full-time job in terms of the income I was getting. I just kind of realised that I had enough work in the pipeline or enough commitments to kind of give it a go for the next 6 months. And that was where I was at, actually, when I first left my job.
Yeah. So you thought, that's it, resign, oops, big leap of faith, and you just crack on with it.
Yeah.
From inside the profession, I would imagine that still, and I have no idea what the numbers are, but I'm going to guess 90, maybe even 95% of accounting firms are not niched. Although the big firms, of course, have departments and different areas of expertise within the firm. But for the small business accountant, I see more and more of them niched. Have you come across Jonathan Ford?
Yes, he works for writers, doesn't he?
Yeah, he works for performing artists. He's in Liverpool,
Yeah, that's
and he
it.
only works for performing artists.
He's quite vocal
Yeah.
in the community, actually. I think he's actually created a platform to help other accountants niche.
You've never thought that you may either set up a division or kind of niche back into something that specifically interests you?
Yeah, I mean, I've gave it a lot of thought, and I guess there's two types of niching. There's niching your marketing, and there's obviously truly niching where you generally don't take on anything else. There's a firm in Manchester called MAP, quite an established, successful firm, sort of connected to Go Proposal and James Ashford.
Paul Barnes.
That's it, Paul Barnes. And they work with digital agencies, but I think more so now. But even when they were niching earlier on, they still had other industries, but they were probably closer to a real niche practice than a lot of people. You've seen it going back years and years. These big firms have a website page that says, we work with vets, we work with doctors. And I think if we did niche, and I have thought about it over the last probably 7 or 8 years, early days, the construction industry would have probably been our niche. A close second and third would have been creatives and professionals, so freelancers, contractors. And I think we've ended up in a different place because I've been around a lot of different accountancy firms. I've seen their journey. I've seen what works, what doesn't work. And I've seen it be successful both ways. I've seen super successful firms that do niche and, super successful firms that don't niche. And what we've kind of realized is it's not so much the industry, it's the mindset of the business owner is kind of our niche. So I guess it's the sort of people that sign up for the entrepreneur circle and stay around. It's entrepreneurial people, because in my experience, most small business owners are not entrepreneurial. They've kind of just got a job. They're not really thinking about growing their business.
I agree. Yeah. They're entrepreneurial enough to have given themselves a job, but it's more or less a job that they do. It's interesting with the definitions of entrepreneur, because one of the definitions is somebody that adds value to things. So we could probably all fall in that category. But to me, an entrepreneur has probably got more than one business, maybe not at the same time, but done different things. I don't particularly consider myself an entrepreneur. I consider myself a small business owner rather than an entrepreneur.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because I used to have the same definition. I used to think an entrepreneur is someone who their business is starting businesses. But I think sometimes we're probably doing ourselves a bit of an injustice if we've just got that one business, but we're still very entrepreneurial in our thinking. But it's a bit like job titles. Sometimes we just come up with these labels and people can't necessarily agree what that means. But in my context, in terms of our client, somebody who wants to grow their business and they want to invest in themselves as well. So we like to kind of work with people that are like-minded business owners.
Yeah, you made a comment before, which I agree with, that most small business owners don't necessarily want to grow. At the end of the day, they still need to do all the compliance tax stuff, even if they're not growing their business. That's a requirement. It's one of the beautiful things about being an accountant is there is a legal requirement to file taxes. It's perfect from that point of view. But there are a lot of businesses that don't really want to grow. They're giving up, maybe. and they're
Yeah.
just quite happy kind of existing, maybe on quite a decent income for the owner. They're not really doing anything.
Yeah, I think what got me interested in some element of coaching through my business, I guess you could argue there was a little bit of imposter syndrome about that, because I started as an accountant. And what I did was I read the business E-Myth pretty early on in that journey. And I realized that if I run this business not as an accountant, but as a business owner, it's going to look very different in the next few years. I managed to take myself out of certain functions in the business, mainly being an accountant. So that's what I don't tend to do much of actually in CTA. And I learned a lot in that journey. And that was my obsession, was just learning from other people, reading lots of books. And I've just been keen to kind of share that with other business owners and try and reignite the passion with some people that are lost. They started the business to have freedom, probably be financially better off, but they've ended up with, in some cases, neither of those things. So it's just trying to help put them back on track is quite rewarding.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know that another book that I've heard you talking about is Profit First. So you're a sort of a believer in the profit first philosophy.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because I read the book the first time around 6 years ago, and I'm looking at it as an accountant, but also a business owner, like anybody else who's probably reading. At the time, my takeaway was I need to cut some expenses. That was my kind of first read of these expenses have got out of hand. I'm focusing on revenue. I need to peg myself back a little bit and kind of focus on growing a bit more profitably. But in terms of actions, when I first read the book, I saved about 10% of my expenses, which was a few £1,000s at that point. But then nothing else happened. I kind of put it back on the shelf. I left it. And I kind of ended up going back into Profit First with a very long-winded journey. I started joining different mastermind groups and networking groups. The EC was one of them. And the more people I was around, I kept on getting asked, what sort of accountant are you? So when you say you're an accountant, they say, what's different about you? Give me something fun or interesting about you. And it was, well, I'm just a normal accountant. We like to help business owners. And it planted the seed that we needed a stronger USP. So I decided to reread the book again, which was just out of interest, really. But I read it completely different the second time because I was seeing the opportunity and it resonated with me more, how we could help other people and how we could align ourselves as part of that vision and that mission of Mike, who wrote the book. To be honest, it's transformed our business because I feel that we're focusing more on outcomes as opposed to services since we've been more aligned to Profit First.
Yeah, definitely. My observation of the accounting industry is it is very much compliance driven, and revenues at the top and your profits is at the bottom, and all the things in the middle that consume the revenue. And it is the way that the industry is geared around thinking. So it is an interesting spin on, well, just turn P&L the other way around, so to speak, and say, well, that's what we want at the top, and then we've got these to take off. That means we need this at the bottom. And it's a good book. I enjoyed. In fact, I must get it out and read it again. It'll be on my phone, an Audible version somewhere.
Yeah, I think rereading is one of my lessons from 2022. I'm obsessed with learning and reading, and lots of like-minded business owners tend to be the same. But I think, and it's almost a bragging thing to say, I read a book a week or I read so many books a month. But actually, I think you're better served going back and reading a really good book again, maybe second or third time through, and taking more action, from that book, that rather than just searching for the next thing all the time.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good point. Read the book properly. Every word in it. You have to read it a few times to get everything out.
Well, Nigel said it, didn't he, in one of the conferences recently? It's not what you know, it's what you do. So it's what are you doing from that book? And not everything will apply to you, but a lot of it will equally. It's just trying to take away the big things to help you in your journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, what would you say? Interesting because you're interested in self-development. Is that maybe one of the things that a lot of small businesses don't do, and it's one of the mistakes that they make?
I think so. A friend of mine who works at Santander, he was a local bank manager. I'd be speaking to him and share all the stuff going on in my business. And he said to me, "Oh, Steve, do you realise a lot of stuff you talk about is mindset? It's just thinking." And I said, well, yeah, because it starts with you as a person, as a business owner. It all starts with your thoughts. And a lot of business owners are not investing in themselves. The challenge that you've got is people don't necessarily want to be told what to do when they're not open to receiving advice. So it's trying to educate and build people's awareness that actually it's probably a better way of doing things, and maybe just starting them on that journey for wherever they are in the self-development side of things.
Yeah, yeah. My experience is there's an awful lot of successful people that kind of a bit scared of and don't really understand how to use a P&L and management accounts and balance sheets and cash flow forecasts. And, is that, do you experience that as well? Is that there's just a bit of a fear factor of it all, which makes them think, okay, you just do that. And by that, I'm really talking about taxes. And then I don't have to be involved in the numbers of it. Do you come across that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because obviously I've talked about the self-development side and kind of business owner mindset, and that's a passion of me personally. And there is a thread that runs through CTA, but ultimately it does come back to the numbers as the foundation. And my experience being in a mastermind was these are business owners that are fairly successful because they've built their business to a certain level of turnover. And a lot of them were not savvy at all when it came to the finances in their business. There's almost a guilt and a sort of embarrassment that they should know more about their numbers. And I learned from being in that group and around these people that there's a huge gap of knowledge. And actually, our mission has been to help the financial literacy understanding of business owners since then. So we see part of our job is to educate business owners, not just to say, here you go, here's your numbers, and speak to them, but actually to involve them in that journey to help them learn more about their business from a numbers perspective.
Do you have any broader education material or programs or that type of thing, maybe for, Cheltenham-based small businesses, where you'll talk to them and educate them about the basics of business finance?
I think we need to do more. I feel that I've had a scattergun approach in terms of marketing and getting content out there to the world from CTA and from my perspective. But the plan for 2023 is actually to find the time to add more value and get in front of more people in different ways. Some of that is sort of strategic partnerships where we can work with people where they've got clients that are going to benefit from some of the material that we have, some of the content. We've kind of dabbled in YouTube, but I can do a lot more on sharing and getting the message out there on YouTube. With the whole profit first thing we're doing, it's gave us an opportunity basically to have a conversation with more people. So in many ways, we've rebranded. Our USP is a bit different from the outside, but we've not had the opportunity as of yet to speak to every single client in our client base and say, have you heard of Profit First? Do you know what it's about? And essentially, it's about understanding your numbers in a really digestible manner. The plan is to kind of use that as an outlet. But one of the ideas I had was to call it the Profit First Club, where it's kind of a low-level membership, and there could be some offers for people to kind of try it. And it's about financial literacy, education, resources, and just get people more involved with these sort of topics.
Yeah, I think there is a strong tie in there with marketing as well, because it doesn't matter how much money you spend to get customers, providing you make more money from the customers. It's customer lifetime value. I definitely do think that lots of small businesses are concerned to spend money on marketing because they don't really understand the numbers and will that grow the business or not grow the business.
It's all about adding value to the business owner, isn't it, really? You've got all these different parts of the business, but they're all important. Some people might argue what's more important. Is it the marketing? Is it the finances? But I think it's hard to separate particularly those two areas.
Yeah. They're two sides of the same coin. Yeah, absolutely. And then, the third side of the coin, do coins have three sides? Don't know, but you know what I mean. It's got an edge as well.
It could be a dice, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a dice. And then that's all the, the operational costs and the operational things that go in there. That very often, if people looked at their finances, the thing that Dan does is he makes you compare at the line item level versus last quarter and then last year, and is that up or down? And it's like sometimes you spot things and you go, yeah, I'm spending a lot more on that, and there's no particular reason to do so. But you wouldn't notice if it was just in a growing P&L.
Yeah, that was a takeaway for me as well, because sometimes we're just focused on the last year, the last quarter, but actually the way Dan does it, he's pretty much looking at a rolling 2-year period, quarter by quarter. And that's a great way to look back and say, my margins were stupid at that point. What was I thinking? When you look back in hindsight, you can see I've overinvested in certain costs in my business. It just kind of nips these problems in the bud a lot earlier if you keep on track of those things.
Yeah. We introduced something years and years ago, which was a scorecard in the business here, which was just to track production, really. We're a service business, so we charge by the hour for our time. So what's production doing? How much have we got? How much did we get in last week? And what are we going to do this week? And if I can just look after how much are we going to bring in next week, I only really have to be focused 1 week ahead.
Yeah.
And if I keep doing that every week, then you fill the gap. You don't have a week goes by where you suddenly go, well, I could have brought more money in, but I didn't pay attention.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea, actually, because we can overcomplicate things and project too far into the future, but it can sometimes provide complexity. And you get a bit paralysis with analysis with too much stuff going on. If you can narrow your focus, and one of our core values is KISS, which is keep it simple, stupid. So we have to sometimes rewind back to say, is this as simple as it needs to be? Are we focusing on the right things? I think looking a week ahead is a really good way of doing that.
Excellent. So we're only at the beginning of 2023, although we're in March now. So I suppose the first quarter is pretty much gone. What's ahead of you for the next of 2023?
Yeah, for a personal level, I'm taking a month off in May, which is not something I've done previously. I'm having a 3-week holiday in Florida, partly celebrating my 40th. My wife's 40 next year. We were talking about doing a joint thing. So we're doing this 3-week family holiday in May. And I thought if I can tag a week on, Mike McCallowick's, one of his other books is called Clockwork. And he says if you can take a month off, that's a big milestone, really, in your business. So it's a personal thing, but it's also a business thing because we're going to see any cracks and, all that sort of stuff, really. So that's in the horizon. We want to get profit first out more to the existing client base. We want to start investing more time with our existing clients to start working with them on some level with profit first. And key to that is actually getting the team involved with profit first, because I've become a bottleneck really for profit first because it's been my new kind of experiment and it's been a great success. And we're really having a huge impact with the people we're working with, but I kind of tested it to make sure that it works and it's getting the impact we want with clients. So I need to get the team involved with that because I've become a bottleneck for that. So they're two of the big things.
Yeah. And I do think it is tricky for accountants, particularly small firms of accountants, where the client's primary thing is tax compliance. Keep me out of jail by paying the tax. Next thing is pay as little tax as I possibly can. And it's only after that that you start to look at, well, where's the added value that the firm could bring to their clients? And for lots of clients, it's like, no, just do that. I don't need any more. I'm not looking to do that. So I think it's an interesting kind of idea, though, that you've got with just the general education around profit first. And I think that people who like that idea will gravitate towards you.
Yeah.
And you won't have to push too hard. So, some of your existing clients won't really be interested. And other people that like what you're saying will gravitate towards you. So, just say it. Just get more stages that you can say it on. It's like everything, isn't it, Stephen? When is the time? I'm running a business here. When do I get the time to do this extra stuff?
What I've done recently to get a lot of engagement is just be myself a bit more. And I've nicked Tim Ferriss's idea, 5 Bullet Friday. Every Friday, I just send an email with 5 bullets. I send a broadcast to every single person in my database of all the things I've learned in that week or resonated with me, and I just share it. And I'm getting more engagement doing that than I am with anything else we've done because it's just natural and it's just, it's my voice, really.
Yep. And that people don't have to agree or anything. It's you just saying what you found.
Just going back to your point of not everybody wants this higher level service or this, this different way of working. It's true because we created a visual in the last 6 months and it's a circle and there's 3 segments and it goes round 1, 2, and 3. We broke it down to number 1 is the finance foundations. And within the finance foundations is the accountancy and tax planning, but standard tax planning, the compliance side, and then bookkeeping. So that's the foundations, really. Everything you need to keep me out of jail. And then moving on from that is profit improvement. And that's where profit first comes in. So if people don't show any interest to improve their profit or they don't think they've got a problem, they're not going to be interested. And then the third piece is wealth maximization. So if you're making more money, how can you make it work smarter for you? How can you keep more of that money in your pocket? How can you invest it? We're not financial advisors, but we're just making sure people are getting the advice they need to make their money work on behalf for them, really.
Yeah, aware that there are options.
Yeah, that's it.
Very good. Okay, cool. Well, if people see this podcast, how can they get hold of you? What's the best way to get hold of you?
Yeah, they can email me directly, or they can go onto the website. So my email is a bit of a mouthful, but it's Stephen with a PH at Cheltenham Tax Accountants.co.uk. We can go onto our website, which is just Cheltenham Tax Accountants. Or if you Google Profit First Accountants, you will see our website. And then, yeah, you can reach out. And if you want to have a chat to see how I can help you, that's not a problem at all.
Yeah, smashing. Great. Yeah. Lovely to chat with you. And I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, David.